Hello everyone, and welcome to World War II at 80. I'm Ron May, your host, author, historian, and speaker on World War II history and the stories of those who served. We continue with our 19th episode today, focusing on the events and stories of July 1945. The end of the war in Europe brought the leaders of the Allied nations together in Potsdam, Germany on July 17, 1945, to plan for the post-war peace in Europe and the war's conclusion in the Pacific Theater. The conference took place at the Cecilianhof Palace in Potsdam from July 17th to August 2nd. President Harry Truman in the center, Prime Minister Winston Churchill at left, and General Secretary Joseph Stalin on the right, gathered with their respective foreign ministers and aides to settle issues related to post-war Europe. There was an interruption in the middle of the conference when Winston Churchill was replaced as Prime Minister by Clement Attlee following the July 28th British general election. Losing the election was a heavy blow to the man who had guided and inspired England through the war since May 1940. The key decisions made during the conference included the ratification of dividing Germany into 4 occupation zones, the decision that the Soviet Union would receive 25% of the industrial equipment from the other 3 zones in Germany, and the banning of the Nazi Party and prosecution of war criminals. The decision was also made to reshape the country of Poland by extending Poland's western and northern borders into former Germany, shown by the green arrows on the map. The eastern part of Poland, shown by the red arrows, had already been absorbed into the Soviet Union after Red Army forces invaded Poland in 1939. In tragic irony, World War II began in 1939 to keep Poland free and stem German expansion. It ended with Poland coming under Soviet communist rule because Soviet forces were already in the country and wanted to keep part of it as a buffer against any future German aggression. England and the United States were unable to convince Stalin to let it remain autonomous. Neither England nor the United States were willing to go to war against Stalin to free the country. It was a bitter pill for the Polish to swallow and resulted in Soviet dominion for the next 46 years. Poland finally gained its independence from Soviet rule in 1991. During the Potsdam Conference, a formal declaration was made to Japan stating that if Japan did not surrender, it would face prompt and utter destruction. Japan did not respond to the declaration. While attending the conference, President Truman informed Joseph Stalin of a new bomb that the U.S. had just tested. From the Truman diaries, he wrote, "On July 24th, I casually mentioned to Stalin that we had a new weapon of unusual destructive force. The Russian premier showed no special interest. All he said was he was glad to hear it and hoped we would make good use of it against the Japanese." End of quote. Stalin showed little reaction because he was already aware of the atomic weapons program from his Russian spies who were observing the bomb's development. Mooresville, Indiana resident John Redman was close to this historical gathering of world leaders in Germany. He provided security on a motorcycle during the Potsdam Conference. Redman was a military policeman serving with the Army's 713th MP Battalion. Morgan County, Indiana resident Merrill St. John also had a role in the Potsdam Conference. He served as a squadron crew chief and radio operator on a C-47 transport with the 441st Troop Carrier Group of the 9th Air Force stationed in England. He was stationed in Berlin after the war and was on the crew flying in supplies for the Potsdam Conference. Turning to the Pacific Theater, the end of July brought the most tragic sinking of a U.S. ship. The USS Indianapolis, commissioned in 1932, was a heavy cruiser active in the Pacific Theater during World War II. She was named for the city of Indianapolis. In her first years, she served as the flagship for President Roosevelt and also the Secretary of the Navy. The happy crew on the Indianapolis was made up of 1,196 men who came from different parts of the United States to form a cohesive team. The ship's crew also included a Marine Corps detachment of 39 men. The commanding officer of the ship was Captain Charles B. McVay III. He was born into a proud lineage of naval service. His father had been a rear admiral in the Navy, and Charles followed in that service. He took command of the Indianapolis in November of 1944. The Indianapolis participated in most sea battles and in support of most island invasions in the Pacific. She earned 10 battle stars for her war service in the Aleutians, the Gilbert and Marshall Islands, Saipan, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Tinian, Guam, the Carolines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Like many ships, she suffered her share of tragedy during the war. Following a Japanese aerial bomb attack off Okinawa, the Indianapolis was hit on March 31, 1945. 9 men died and were subsequently buried at sea. The damaged ship left for Mare Island, San Francisco, in the United States for repairs. After her overhaul, Indianapolis received orders to undertake a top-secret mission of the utmost significance to national security, to proceed to Tinian Island, carrying the enriched uranium, at that time about half of the world's supply, and other parts required for the assembly of the atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy, which would be dropped on Hiroshima a few weeks later. No one on board the ship, including Captain McVay, knew that the secret cargo it unloaded on Tinian was half the uranium and parts of the atomic bomb Little Boy that would soon be dropped over Hiroshima on August 6th. After a brief stop in Guam, the Indianapolis received orders and proceeded unescorted toward Leyte in the Philippine Islands. While the ship was crossing the Philippine Sea, about halfway between Guam and Leyte, the Imperial Japanese submarine I-58 spotted and subsequently torpedoed the ship. The submarine was commanded by Machitsura Hashimoto. The enemy submarine fired 6 torpedoes at the Indianapolis, 2 of which made contact and ripped open the ship, allowing seawater to rush into and fill the internal compartments. Within 12 minutes, the Indianapolis was swallowed by the sea. Of the 1,196 men on board, 300 of them went down with the ship. Just over 900 men abandoned the ship before she was swallowed by the sea. And there they languished for the next 4 nights and 5 days while trying to stay alive. The Indianapolis was not reported missing when it failed to arrive in Leyte Gulf as scheduled on July 31st. Adding to the tragedy for the men in the water, the ship's SOS signals, which were sent out just before she sank, were dismissed by 3 different Navy shore communication stations. Within their first 24 hours in the water, hundreds of sharks began to harass and attack the men. Many died from these vicious shark attacks, although the exact number is not known. During the survivors' 4th day at sea, Lieutenant J.G. Wilbur Chuck Gwynn, flying a PV-1 Ventura with a crew of 5, miraculously spotted some of the men in the water. It occurred while he was troubleshooting a loose radio cable at the back of the plane. He looked down and noticed an oil slick and then saw groups of men floating. He radioed in the coordinates for rescue efforts to commence. The first person to offer direct aid to the men's plight was Pilot Lieutenant Adrian Marks, a Frankfort, Indiana native, who was flying a PBY Catalina amphibious plane. Disobeying direct orders, he landed his plane in the dangerous waters to assist the floating survivors. He and his crew rescued 56 of the stranded men, many of whom were lashed to the wings of the plane while they awaited rescue by ship. Marks became one of the rescuers' heroes. His hometown of Frankfort, Indiana, honors him today on a mural painted on one of the downtown buildings. Rescue for the survivors finally came the next day from several ships which steamed to the area. But by that time, almost 5 days after the sinking, the majority of men had already perished. Of the almost 900 men who made it into the water after the sinking of their ship, only 317 survived, making this the worst sea disaster in U.S. Navy history. Captain McVeigh, who had made it to one of the life rafts, was among the survivors. One of the crewmen not rescued was Thomas Leon Barksdale of Seymour, Indiana. He made it off the ship, but died in the water sometime during the 5 days of languishing at sea. During rescue operations, his body was located and then weighed down for sea burial. The rescued men were in bad shape, and some required many months of hospitalization before they could return home. The surviving crew of the Indianapolis were taken to area island-based hospitals for medical treatment. Here are a few of the survivors being taken off the ship and delivered to the base hospital on the island of Guam. Among the injured and exhausted survivors on Guam was Martinsville, Indiana native William Leroy Gooch. He entered the Navy in February 1944 and became a fireman second class. He joined the crew of the USS Indianapolis of May that same year and was on her for most of her Pacific campaigns. After making it off the sinking ship on July 30th, Gooch, who didn't know how to swim and wasn't wearing a life jacket, was one of the lucky ones who made it to one of the life rafts that had been released from the ship. In the book Report from the Pacific, written by former Indianapolis News war correspondent Leo Litz, Gooch shared the following, quote, "Much to my surprise, it must have been a miracle, for as I was splashing and thrashing, suddenly just within my outstretched arms, there bobbing up and down the water was an empty Navy life raft." End of quote. He and the others spent the next 108 hours in it while awaiting rescue. Sharks circled the raft throughout the ordeal. The raft had a small amount of food, but no water. One day, Gooch caught a fish and ate it raw. He and his raft mates were finally rescued on the morning of August 3rd. Gooch is shown here in the photo receiving his Purple Heart on Guam from Admiral Raymond Spruance. Indianapolis native James "Jimmy" O'Donnell was the only survivor from the city of Indianapolis. He later became a firefighter and in the early 1990s spent 4 years raising money for the future USS Indianapolis Memorial by giving talks throughout the area. He was later honored with his own statue outside of the city market in downtown Indianapolis. News of the sinking of the Indianapolis was withheld by the United States Navy until Japan's surrender. It was an intentional effort to overshadow the tragic news of the sinking with the exuberant news of the war's end. The survivors came back to the United States on the USS Hollandia, arriving at the port of San Diego in September 1945. Decades later, the still grieving survivors put their focus and energy toward a legacy for their ship and crew by having a memorial built. After years of effort to find property for the memorial, they accepted a donation of land from the mayor along the developing canal in downtown Indianapolis and dedicated it on July 30th, 1991. The dedication for the USS Indianapolis Memorial on July 30th, 1995 drew approximately 3,500 people, including 107 of the survivors, who came to see the unveiling of this memorial created by Joseph Fisher. The memorial stands proudly today as a testimony to the ship and her crew. The names of all the men on board the ship that fateful night of its sinking are engraved on the back of the memorial. The lost ship was finally located in August of 2017 when billionaire Paul Allen's search crew aboard the research vessel Petrel discovered the location of the sunken Indianapolis 3 miles down in the Philippine Sea. The ship is still resting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean 80 years after its sinking. Although the USS Indianapolis is remembered as the greatest at-war sea disaster in Navy history, she played a pivotal role in causing Japan to surrender. That story we will explore in our next episode. Learn more about World War II history during 1945 and the stories of those who served in my World War II trilogy, Our Service, Our Stories, Volumes 1, 2, and 3. The books are available for purchase on my website, ronaldpmay.com. To contact me for questions or to schedule me for a speaking engagement, email me at ron@ronaldpmay.com. Also, be sure to check out all my other videos on my YouTube channel at World War II History and Stories with Ron May. You will find a link to my videos on the YouTube tab from the homepage of my website. Please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Please share it with others who you think may be interested. See you next month for our episode 20, featuring the events and stories of August 1945 on World War II at 80.